welcome everyone to your second episode of the Softlock podcast for September of 2024. I am one of your hosts, Jake, and is Jonathan here? Are you there, sir?
Get me out. I'm trapped in the computer. Get me out of here.
What are you feeling like today, Jonathan?
I'm 100% realistic Luigi saying no to a suppository.
And what is it that you're saying no to, realistic Luigi?
Suppository.
Are you implying that I'm giving you a suppository by making you do this podcast?
It's a suppository labeled podcast insert into asshole. I'm going, nope. Because this is a long podcast.
It can be. It has been known to be a long podcast. And it has been known to be long in the tooth and long in the asshole, some may say.
That was terrible. That was a horrific pairing of words.
You said it was long. What am I supposed to say?
In my head, long equated to just like a big pill. And that I feel like that's significantly less sexual.
A long pill.
Than a long pill is significantly less sexual than a giant pill, you know?
Wait. So there, because the pill is long, it makes it more vulgar than just if it was really fat.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Because in my head, a long pill is phallic. Very phallic. IMO. Meanwhile, if we were like that episode of SpongeBob where Mr. Krabs is old and Pearl gives him the giant pill that he swallows, I'm not looking at that pill going, that is phallic. Because it's pill. I hate the pill. It's pill shaped. We make it long. That's not pill-shaped. I'm not pill-shaped. That's not true. I disproved that 10 years ago.
What is this podcast? Besides talking about giant suppository pills. This is a podcast about video games and about me and Jonathan. And that's essentially all you need to know. You can find us at SoftlockPod on pretty much everything. And today we're going to be talking about boss fights in video games. It's going to be a deep dive. We haven't done a deep dive in quite a while. We're talking about boss fights, everything that's good about them, what makes them what they are, and what we like about them. So where do you want to start with this? You want to just talk about like what we think makes a good boss fight?
Well, first of all, I don't even have my notes open. I was just gonna say, let's look at the notes. Guess who doesn't have the notes open? Big, huge dumbass, me.
Damn.
But I mean, let's define a boss fight, I guess, first and foremost. I mean, a boss fight is a big deal in video games. Almost any video game that has like combat, I feel like, has some type of boss fight or something like that. Boss fights can take many, many forms. They can be really fucking shitty. They can be the best parts of the game. Yeah, I don't know. How do you even define boss fight besides that? Or did I just do that good of a job?
That was a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know what? Boss fights are kind of like, it's kind of like, I was going to say it's kind of like taking a shit. It's like, you got the game, right? And you're playing the game, and you sit on the toilet, and you're pooping, and then the boss fight is the one you got to really push for. And it's tough, but it gives the most satisfaction and relief afterwards.
True.
Typically. A good boss fight will do that. A bad boss fight will be... I was going to really describe a really nasty poop, and I'm not going to do that.
I sit on the toilet brokenhearted, tried to poop and only farted.
Yeah, that's better than anything you said, actually.
But yeah, I think the thing that I always hear people talk about with boss fights is that it's like, it's just an enemy that is really strong that blocks your progress from either finishing the game or moving on to a new section of the game. But really, that's not true.
I mean, I mean, it is, but like in a very, that's like a that's like that. You know what that would be? That would be like the scientific definition of a boss fight. You know?
Yeah.
It's like just, there's no frizz to that.
There's no riz.
There's no riz on that statement.
There's so many boss fights that like aren't just combat though. Like there, I would say that the idea of a boss, I think, is more of the idea of a skill check, a checkpoint, a wall that you have to climb before you can get to the next section. Because there are a lot of games I play where I'm like, yeah, I did that boss, and then the boss wasn't like a turtle with demon horns. It was like a flight of stairs that I had to obstacle over really, really depthly to get to the next section. You know what I mean?
Yes. I am trying to. Is this a real example?
No, but like in a lot of puzzle games and in a lot of platformers, there are sections where I'm like, this isn't a boss fight, but it feels like a boss fight. You know what I mean?
Kind of. I think most video games, if it's most video games will make it very clear that it's a boss fight.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And a good boss fight will make it clear that it's like a boss fight and not just a challenging segment. As we will get into, because I do think a big part of a boss fight is pacing when the boss is fought. Not just like the pacing of the actual fight itself, but when the boss is fought is just as important as like the boss itself, because if you fuck up that pacing, then you confuse your audience somehow and they're just gonna be like, wait, oh, that was the boss? What?
Yeah, that I know exactly what you mean, because like there are some games that do it really excellently. Like I'm thinking of the Elden Ring DLC right now. Like the bosses in that are perfectly spaced out, so you're always kind of working your way up to one, finishing it, and then you feel accomplished and you kind of descend back down and then come back up. But then another recent example of a game that did not do that was Alan Wake 2, where I did the final boss fight and then played the game for 3 more hours and realized that I did the final boss fight already and had no idea.
Yeah, that kind of thing really like messes with you, especially like final boss fights really are like the sink or swim moment. Like boss fights in general, I mean, you can have a good fight, you can have a bad fight, you can like be confusing, but it kind of like comes and goes. But when you make like the finale of your game, something like that, then that can really like stick with you, and you're just like, well, that was ridiculous.
Honestly, any game, if you have gameplay after the end of the final boss fight, it's got to be like a quick time event at most. Like Tears of the Kingdom, that hit. But if I had to like walk around after that and do another puzzle or something, now we're completely throwing off the pacing.
Well, yeah, that's yeah. You got it exactly right. Like it just fucks with the pacing, because you're like, I'm done with the game. I did like the hardest thing I could do, or at least the most important part of the story. I've just done it, and now you're gonna make me like do something like silly. It's kind of silly. It's kind of like, I spoke about this in the last episode, I think, but Mousetrap. I saw Mousetrap in London, which is like the longest running like stage performance of something ever, and it's like a murder mystery. And they like, the killer is revealed, they catch the killer, and then there's like probably 5 to 10 minutes of falling action where they're just like, oh, thank God that's over. And you're just like, what? It's over. End it. I don't need to see that. You need a little
bit of that in film and in theater. Maybe not as much. I know 10 minutes in theater is a lot, but you need more in that.
Yeah. If you saw it, I think you would also be like, what is going on? Like, it was really bizarre, actually.
Yeah, but it can even be as simple as like spacing out like bosses versus mini bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know a lot of platformers will do that, where it's like in this world there's one mini boss and one boss, and from the very beginning of the world you see them on the map, you know when you're going to get to them. But then some of them try to get cute and they throw in like an extra level after, or maybe after you do the mini boss you have to do like another mini boss and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, I get you want to keep the variety for the player and always keep them on their toes, but just in general, I think it's kind of in the player's prerogative to plan their gaming out in the way that they see fit. Like, I know that's a little bit of a, like, that's a gamer take for sure, but like, when I play a game, I kind of map it out in my head of like, okay, it's going to take me about this long to do this thing, so I'm going to plan my evening around that, so I have enough time, and then I can, maybe take a break or go do dinner or whatever. And whenever you change that up, it can be dicey. It's not always bad, but it can be dicey.
Yeah, well, I think that is increasingly a bad idea, probably, because games, as time goes on, they want to change things up, so you're going to get games that do not want to end after the final boss, or it's like, it seems like the final boss, and then the game still goes, and it goes, no, here's the real final boss, and that just like messes with you. Gaming is not for the working man. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Gaming is not for. I mean, like, it is, but like, it's not like when we were kids, man.
Yeah, man. I can't imagine playing through like any action RPG, like long or action RPG nowadays, whenever I could just like lay on my bed and play some like turn-based or puzzle thing for like 20 minutes, you know what I mean? I can't picture it. So that's why when I'm really committed to it, I need to have that guide laid out in front of me. And so that, yeah, pacing is important for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which for me is just letting me plan.
Jake is the fragile soy jack.
I am, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
He's like, oh boy, adequately normal structured game, yippee. And he's like the soy jack with his eyes bulging out.
Yeah, and then I get like a like a skill check boss at the end of the world, and I'm like, God damn it! And I just throw the disc in the trash.
Yeah. I understand.
Yeah, what else makes a good boss fight, though?
Well,
I mean, I think the obvious one is the challenge.
I mean, I think that this is such like a good question. I think I have an easier time saying what makes a bad boss fight than what a good boss fight is like, because it's like, you know, saying what makes a good boss fight is kind of like saying like what makes a game good. It's like there's so many things that you can do with boss fights that make them good, but I think we should probably just talk about it in like a traditional sense, and then, you know, if we have some outliers or some unique examples, we could bring those up. But yeah, you were saying challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like, I always want to be positive about games, but obviously it is way easier to talk about things you don't like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just saying like a boss fight is challenging. That's what it is. Like from the very beginning. I mean, I know it's not the first, of course, but you know, the most iconic early boss is Bowser at the end of Mario 1. That fight, not really that challenging, but the level
Speak
getting
for
you
yourself.
to, I mean, so, okay, it's challenging. It is. Bowser's probably one of the hardest enemies in Super Mario Bros. Because it's erratic. There's, you know, no real repetition. There's no pattern that you can follow. You just kind of have to. So you just have to know where to jump and when to jump and how to jump to get away from the fireballs. You know what I mean? So
500 hammers.
but what, like, from the earliest days, what makes a boss is that it's just a little bit harder than the rest of the game. And I think we're still kind of figuring out what is too hard, especially in a lot of genres.
Yeah, I actually kind of disagree with usually boss fights, I think, are harder than the rest of the game, but I don't think that's like an ironclad rule. I think a boss fight can just be like enough, as long as it's exciting in a different way that the game has not like presented yet. Because I think a lot of games, like, I don't know, like a lot of the Mario games and the, like, I don't know, Donkey Kong games, shit like that, where there's like, you know, boss at the end of the world. Of course there's going to be a boss at the end of the world. It's like, I've had less trouble with many of the bosses in those games than I did with, like, the single minecart level in one of the Donkey Kong Country games, you know? It's like, it's sometimes it doesn't have to be more difficult. It just needs to be a differently structured moment and a new challenge rather than a harder challenge. It depends. Right. I think you could skirt past that rule pretty well.
Yeah, but I still think that the best boss fights are the ones that present you with a challenge. And even like you're saying, it can be not necessarily more challenging, but just a different challenge. But like that's the idea that you have going into it, of like, this is something I need to overcome. We're like,
maybe the best boss fights, but we're just talking about good boss fights.
I mean, fair.
Acceptable boss fights.
Fair, but like, you know, in Donkey Kong, for example, some of those levels are so much harder than the bosses, like you were saying, but you still kind of get psyched up when you see that you're going up against one enemy that is going to provide you at least a substantial challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the fact that it's one sometimes enemy. It frames it in a different way that makes you kind of feel like, you know, it's one-on-one. It's me versus him. It's like, whereas a level, you know, yeah, I have the challenge level at the end of the game that's pissing me off, that make me break my controller, but I'm not like yelling at the level. I'm yelling at the platform or the water. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, you know, some boss fights are the water.
You're right.
I don't know. We'll have to get into like specifics. I think I have very, very specific examples like later.
Okay.
And I think those are going to actively challenge the difficulty idea of a good boss fight.
Okay.
At least I think so, because I think the rest of Impact in this like little list we have, Impact is probably the most important part of the entire thing.
I think so too. I think the impact that a boss fight has on you, you're right, does not always have to be related to difficulty. And I think the best boss fights, the good boss fights, are all the ones where they're memorable because they had an emotional impact on you one way or another, whether it's a challenge that causes you to get frustrated, whether it's a moment that is very emotional, or something that's very flashy or very, spectacle, and like you just can't look away. It's so much different from the rest of the game. There's a lot that boss fights can do that the rest of the game can't do.
Right. That's where the game kind of like shows you what it's got, if it hasn't already.
And that's like another one I have is like it kind of tests your skills from the rest of the game, and not all of them do this.
No.
Certainly not all of them do this, but I think that the best boss fights, the ones that I enjoy the most, are the ones that encourage you or force you to display that, like, yeah, I'm good at this game. I've played enough of this game to know that, like, I have mastered the skills, and now this is one task that's asking me to do all of them, or a lot of them in conjunction, where the rest of the game doesn't do that.
Yeah, the ultimate test.
And
a lot of final bosses really like do that, honestly.
But I wish more would. That's the thing.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, I don't think every final boss needs to be like that, because it's like, I don't think anything should be any of one thing at all. But oh my god, I just choked on water. The water was my boss fight, just like I just said. I think that sometimes it may be a bit too structured if a final boss fight is just like things you've all seen before. It could be like things you've seen before in a different way. I do enjoy a good boss fight that kind of changes things up. I think, like, thinking about Ocarina of Time, honestly, it's like, I really like the boss fights in Ocarina of Time, and those are kind of like mini puzzles in a way, most of them. Where you have to, King Dodongo throw a bomb into the King Dodongo's mouth, and he gets stunned, and you have to find some way to stun the boss before you can attack it, as opposed to many boss fights where you really can start attacking it from the very beginning. Zelda does that thing where it's like it's like a puzzle in a way. And I'm thinking about the Ganondorf fight at the end of that game, where it is just like a souped up version of the Phantom Ganon fight from earlier in that game, where you have to do like the energy tennis. And that is like, oh, we've seen this before, and now we're gonna like put it to the test, with some extra shit. But then the final section of the game where you fight Ganondorf in his beast form, that is completely different than most of the fights in the game, because you have to just constantly attack his tail from behind. There's no like puzzle to do, there's no thing to stun him or anything and then like open up a weak point. His weak point is open the entire time, and you just have to maneuver yourself behind him. And that is really cool, I think.
Yeah, I always thought it was weird.
That's like a new thing that it does,
Yeah. And that is an example of a, because it's not a gimmick or anything like that, because it's just, do the combat of this game in a way that's a little bit different. It's not like, here, Link, here's a gun.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I always thought it was weird growing up that they gave you Phantom Ganon halfway through, or however long it is, and then when you get to the boss fight, you're like, oh, I already did this, and then at least it has the redeeming Ganon fight. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of grown to appreciate it more, because it's a weird thing to do the tennis, the ping pong with the balls.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know that going into it, I can imagine how it might be a little frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, you have Navi. She tells you exactly what to do, so I think...
Yeah, but I was a child. I'm not gonna read.
That's what I did. It's like, there's not that much you can really do, I think. I feel like everything else he does. Well, you're also talking to me. Ocarina of Time is like one of my favorite games of all time. So it's like I'm on a different fucking level when I talk about that game. But I don't know. Somehow I did beat Ocarina of Time when I was young. And I truthfully am not really sure how I did it. I must have been really dedicated and really dialed in whenever I played that game as a kid, because I played that game as a kid better than I played many games as like a teenager. Like, I don't know what I must have been taking in every piece of information, really listening and like understanding and just trying shit over and over again. I am actually genuinely impressed with my younger self for playing Ocarina of Time and actually figuring it out, like almost all of it out. I can't fucking believe that.
Yeah.
And that may be just a testament to the design of Ocarina of Time. But I really enjoy both the Phantom Ganon and Ganondorf fights, because like Phantom Ganon, you know, it does like the tennis thing, but also the first phase of the boss is that whole thing where he's on his horse and he goes through like the paintings, and that's really cool. And then Ganondorf is such a sick fight because of the environment that you're in. Like you just climbed Ganon's tower and you're in a completely different like arena. You're on that really tall spire that he can like knock you off of. And he's got a lot of different moves that you can kind of like mess around with. But I don't know, just like the music and the atmosphere and the build up, like climbing the tower, and then you finally get there, and you're just like, this is sick as fuck. Is it the most difficult? No. Did we just see it 7 dungeons ago? Oh wow. Actually, let's see. Yeah, that's like 6 dungeons ago. There's a lot of dungeons in that game. Did we just see that gimmick right now? Like just recently? Yeah. But I don't know. I just really, really like that fight. And that's like kind of what I'm getting at, where like you don't need every aspect of our list to have a good boss fight. I think you can even have just as little as one aspect of our qualities of a good boss fight to have a good boss fight. Or maybe 2. Maybe 2 is a more reasonable thing. But yeah, I don't know. I just love that fight.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to touch on what you were talking about the music, because for me, yeah, you're right, it can't be the only thing you have, but for me, music might be the most important factor in making a good boss fight.
Yeah.
Because I can think of a lot of Souls fights that I did where I'm like, wow, this is almost objectively designed well. Like, this is a great fight, I'm having a great time. Really not vibing with the music that's playing right now, and then it becomes a pretty forgettable fight, to be honest. Meanwhile, there are other fights, I'll stick in FromSoft because that's a good example, where the boss itself, like, I'm like, you know what, this is fine, or maybe it's a little bullshit, but I'm having a good time because I'm listening to this song. Like, I'm thinking of Sif, like, I can't, that's not a good boss fight, but that song is so fucking cool.
Right.
It's very memorable, and for me, music is a big chunk of what I value in a boss fight. It goes hand in hand with impact, obviously.
Yeah. Presentation and impact are very, very close together. You could really have like the shittiest non-fight ever, but the first time you play it, it just presents itself in such a way that you don't even realize that it's complete dog shit. Moonlight Butterfly in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Most of the Dark Souls 1 fights are like flaming piles of garbage. Okay, maybe they're not that bad, but they're just like heavily flawed. Like fucking Moonlight Butterfly. I do like Sif. Capra Demon, go fuck yourself.
This is where it's obligatory for me to mention, because Sam makes me mention this every time I talk about Dark Souls, that she beat the Asylum Demon on the first try. And the Asylum Demon, pretty shitty fight, kind of by design, so that it's not too hard for you to beat, but it's got some pretty good music.
You mean like literally the first Asylum Demon you fight?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really funny. I wanted to mention this, but I think it's really funny when a game gives you like the sickest music ever with like the shittiest little boss fight, and you're just like, well, okay. Well,
yeah.
Did I just do it too well? And it's like, no, it just sucks. It's just a bad boss fight. I don't have any examples that aren't like jokes that I could think of, because they're so unmemorable that I can't even think of them, but like, they're out there. They are out there for sure.
Pretty much any of the bosses in Earthbound.
Shut the fuck up. That's not true. That's not true. That is true. But Earthbound does this thing. No, listen. This has been a complaint that I've had about Earthbound for years, because I played Mother 3 after Earthbound, and I went, oh wow, the combat is so much better in Mother 3 because they do boss fights so much better. Earthbound, it is a timer. You are on a timer of how fast you can dish out the most damage possible in Earthbound, because bosses, for some reason, have relatively low amounts of HP, so it's really less of like I don't know. When I think of most RPG boss fights, I think of like longer fights that, you know, you buff, you debuff, you do status things, you heal, you do everything you can. You use your full wheelhouse to see what you can do. Earthbound does not do that. Earthbound, it's like, how many times do I need to cast PSI Rocking before this thing goes down? And you can usually, if you prepare well enough, like take a boss down. I'm thinking shit like the Thunder Elemental later in the game. Kraken of the Sea, like shit like that. Like those are like most of the bosses that you have when you're in a full entourage. In Earthbound, you can just destroy immediately. Mother 3 is not like that. Mother 3 beefed up the HP by so much. And Mother 3 has really, like, probably one of the best, probably some of the best boss fights I've ever had in a JRPG, a turn-based RPG, because it really makes all your skills valuable with, giving like defense up, offense up, using Duster's skills. Boney is there, I guess. But it's really, really good, and I suggest anyone who's into RPGs like play that because they have some really good boss fights. Except for the haunted instruments in like chapter like 3 or something. That part actually sucks. So, but that's it. Like that's what I'm saying. Like with some shit like Earthbound got some stinkers because it's just not made to have. It's almost like they didn't design it to have boss fights. I mean, some of them are good. You got like the boss fights you fight when you're just Ness. I was gonna say are good. They're not good actually because really you just take turns attacking and then eat a burger. But I don't know. I remember Pokey being fine, and then the actual final boss fight of the game, I guess, isn't like actually a fight.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah, fights that aren't actually fights is a contentious topic in the game.
Very popular, but Gygas is sick as fuck. I'm not gonna pretend like it isn't.
That first, maybe not first, but one of the first boss fights, the robot in the backyard of the arcade where it plays Johnny Be Good.
Oh, fucking Frank's Machine.
Machine, yeah, that's a good one.
It's funny. I'm thinking another one that the first time I played Earthbound, I got super stuck on it. Was the after you get through on it, and then the cops arrest you, and you have to fight all the cops, and then Captain Strong. That one is like, I like it when boss fights kind of go out of the box sometimes. It's like, okay, you're gonna fight 5 cops in a row, and they drag you to the station, and you have to do it to progress instead of like going through a dungeon and then fighting like the big thing right before like a save fight, like a save point. It's like, okay, you finished the dungeon. Okay, this is happening now. And it's just like a memorable moment, you know? Mm-hmm. Is it a good boss fight? No, not really.
Something you talked about with Mother 3 that I wanted to touch on is like, yes, in a turn-based RPG, there is an argument that simply taking an already well-designed boss that may be too easy and just giving it more HP often fixes the issue. But kind of the pacing of the fight itself, rather than when the fight is, has for me a lot to do with how much HP the boss has. Yeah. Sometimes it's a lot of HP for no reason.
Yeah, if you have like a really damaged sponge boss, you're just like, get this fucking thing over with. Like I think a big contender of like the worst types of boss fights that do this are like the Souls-like games, or games that want to be like hard. Because when you're fighting something for that long, where a very small error can lead to big consequences, it isn't really fun. It's extremely frustrating and nerve-wracking, and some people like that. I am not a huge fan of that. I think super bosses in RPGs kind of get away with this a bit better than super bosses in, like, I don't know. Well, the thing is about super bosses is that they're not in games that aren't really RPGs. So,
true, yeah.
I mean, usually there could be like a secret boss fight. I'm thinking like all the Yakuza games have a Mon at the end of the game, and like those are super bosses. But even then, it's not like that much of a big deal. Super bosses in the Final Fantasy games are like 12 trillion HP enemy. That's like it's almost like a joke. Well, I think that they stopped doing it, but like Final Fantasy 13. I think the super bosses got increasingly popular after they started doing it in 7 with the emerald, or with the weapons, and then they just kept on one-upping it, you know, with shit like I don't know what the super boss is in 8, but like in 9 it's like Abzu or some shit. That's not the right name, but It's like the big orb, and they kept on like one-upping it, and then Final Fantasy 13 or something like that has like a 12 billion HP enemy. It's like, fuck you.
I think I'm gonna bring up this now. One of my least favorite boss fights, perhaps my least favorite boss fight in all of gaming, is Hush from The Binding of Isaac, because it scales its health, so it's just always too long. It always has too much health, and there's no way to avoid that, no matter how powerful you are.
And Delirium,
Hush,
does the same shit.
Delirium and Super Greed in The Binding of Isaac. Listen, it's not too late to make a change. The idea that these bosses' health scale to your damage is the worst decision I've ever seen in any game.
I can't believe that they haven't fixed that. I'm like thinking about it right now. Out of all the things that Binding of Isaac is like 10 out of 10, like probably one of the best like roguelikes, one of the best games I've ever played in my life. Not perfect because of shit like that. And it's like there's no one on the dev team is like, we should probably remove that.
Yeah, and no one likes it. I've never heard someone say that they like it. Ever.
It's silly. It's super silly. And I can understand Delirium being like a total... First of all, Delirium, just like actually design-wise, is just shit. Because especially when it goes like berserk, I don't know, like the last like quarter of its health, and it's just like teleporting everywhere, you're just like, I don't really know. But Delirium is almost better than Hush in a way, because it's like, this is the super final boss before, you know, Repentance. But this is like the super final boss of the game. So you have to have like a cracked run to do this, to the point where it doesn't even matter that we scale your health. You are doing so much damage that you are somehow circumventing it, which does happen. You can in fact circumvent the Delirium and Hush damage cap by just having such a cracked run. So I think Delirium kind of gets away with it just a little bit, but Hush doesn't, because Hush has a time requirement, and it just fucks up everything. You have to get to Hush in like under 30 minutes, and then like, I don't give a shit, man. It sucks.
I think Super Greed might be the worst offender of them, because he's always the final boss of that mode. Always.
Yeah, Super Greed. I don't even really like Greed mode that much, to be honest. It's pretty good. Greed mode is pretty good, but like, you can really get like fucked really hard. Like if you're just like, you know, I want to play Eve. Like if you're gonna play Eve or any character that has like lower than like 2.5 damage, you're like, you know, you're gonna be shitting upwards.
Yeah. And another one that stands out for me with just having too much HP, final boss of Persona 3. God, man, maybe I'm a little biased, because my game glitched and I had to do it twice, and it probably took me a collective of 5 hours to do this final boss.
The glitch?
I did get the glitch.
That sucks.
But that might be the longest JRPG boss fight that I've done that isn't a super boss, and I hated every second of it.
It's ridiculously long. Like the whole like, I'm gonna go through all the tarot, I'm sorry, what are they called? Yeah, I guess. What are the actual signs? I don't remember I don't know what it's called like individually, but like the cards.
The Arcana.
The Arcana, there we go, thank you. I'm gonna go through all the Arcana, and you're just like, after like 4, you're like, I think I'm done. And then you actually have like 10 more. And you're just like, man, this really sucks.
But with that said, so like, yes, the option of just give it a lot of health to make it kind of like a gauntlet, I think that can be a positive, but it's very easy to tip into delirium, into monotony. It's a slippery slope. I'd rather them make the boss deal more damage, almost 9 times out of 10. I'd rather them just make the boss more strong than tankier.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like super bosses. I did all the super bosses for Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 4, and 5, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. The Game Boy Advance versions of Final Fantasy 1, 2, not 3. It's all 1 to 5, except for 3, because 3 did not get ported to Game Boy for some completely bizarre reason that I cannot put my finger on. Probably because they were developing it for a remake for DS. But there's super bosses in all those games, and they did not do that, surprisingly. I was anticipating it. Final Fantasy 4 specifically has a really crazy super boss, because it's so difficult, and you have to rely on doing these trials in a certain way to get special items that kind of freeze the enemy in place. So it's like not the greatest thing in the world, but at least it's not just like we made the hardest enemy ever, and you just have to deal with it and be either level 99 or like play perfectly. And instead, it like kind of does like something like that. Like that's an interesting way of doing it, but fucking like some shit like Lisa the Painful, the definitive edition, they got like that new update, and there's a super boss in that update, and they actually patched this because it's like absurd. But when that came out, there was videos of it online, and like that is like a I'm like not even kidding. I think it was almost like a 3-hour boss fight.
Whoa.
Isn't that like the craziest thing ever? I actually don't think I'm right about that. I don't think it's 3 hours. I think it might be like 2 hours. Let me actually look this up real fucking quick. If you want to talk about something else, well, I just looked this up because I don't have anything else to say after that.
Yeah, that is crazy that it would ask you to do a gauntlet like that. Where there are boss fights that last a really long time that I love. Like a lot of the Souls bosses do this, and then a lot of like action games will do the thing where it's like just fight 1,000 fucking enemies with no healing. And I do enjoy that as long as it's not unfair, which I think that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. But also some of those Souls bosses that just take a really long time, like it can take a long time not because they have a lot of HP, but because you just got to position yourself correctly, and I enjoy that. But I feel like I'm harping on the things I hate, which I earlier said obviously is going to happen. Final boss of Elden Ring. It's a really long boss fight just because the boss just runs away from you 90% of the time.
Oh, the Elden
Beast. Yeah, it just runs away from you. I did hear that they added in the ability to use your horse in that fight, so I'll have to go back to it and see how that changes it. Yeah, in the DLC update.
Wow, that's interesting.
But like things that just run away from you and take forever, not great.
No, unless that's like the fight, like that's like the idea of the fight. I'm thinking about the end in Metal Gear Solid 3. Yeah, that's like, you know, you played this. Most boss fights are just kind of like, die in front of you, get the fuck out of the way, or fight. But like the end is just this really old dude that does almost the same exact shit that you do. He's hiding in this big arena and with a sniper, camouflaging himself. And you are hiding as well, and it's just like a game of cat and mouse where it's like you have to find the other person, but you have no idea where they are, and you have to get clues on where they are and sneak up on them, but they're doing the exact same shit to you, and that's the fight, pretty much. It's not like they have a ton of health or they keep on running from you. Like, once you get to him, you can pretty much like destroy him instantly, or you can just turn the game off and wait a week, and then he dies of old age. Do you know about that?
No.
Do you know about that?
No.
Oh, yeah. That game is really bizarre. If you save your game during the boss fight and then you don't play the game for like, I think a week or more, and you come back, a cutscene plays of Snake like waking up and he's like looking around the arena, and then he finds the end and he like pushes him over, and he's just like fucking dead. And he calls up, I don't know, like Paramedic or Major Zero. And he's just like, well, guess he must have died. Good job, Snake. Keep going. And you're just like, what? It's like really fucking funny. But I did just confirm right now, the super boss in the unpatched version of Lisa the Painful Definitive Edition is in fact like 2.5 hours. And it is absolute insanity. I'll share the video with you. I don't know if you should watch it or not, but it's like almost, when I watched it, I didn't watch the full thing. I skimmed through it. It is the most cracked as fuck thing. A big part of Lisa the Painful is that the main character is a drug addict and just severely mentally traumatized and has like super PTSD. And the idea is that this is like a complete manic drug trip, and it kind of fits that because it feels like it reads like the worst trip that anyone has ever taken in their life. And it is nuts. And if you're a big fan of Lisa the Painful, you should probably do it. I mean, they did patch it. I heard it's like much shorter now. Like much shorter. I think it's still like an hour, but it's you know, there's segments. It's not just like one guy. It is a completely like it's one fight that's segmented into like, I don't know, 10 fights. And the ending, you should at least, if you're a fan of Lisa the Painful, you should at least see the aftermath of that fight, which is like another 30 minutes or like 20 to 25 minutes of just like really effective lore and just like a very emotional moment, and then it just ends. And it really like fits. It has impact. I will give you that. It has impact. Even just watching it, I was like, oh my god.
I love whenever a really hard boss fight has a big payoff. Because a lot of the times the super boss, what's the reward? A weapon. What are you going to use the weapon on? The super boss is dead.
Yeah, the super boss is in fact dead.
Really interesting lore, or maybe like some trivia, or just some, even if it's just a joke, just a really good joke. I love that.
Final Fantasy, most of the super bosses don't even give you anything. They just give you proof that you defeated the super boss. It's like, okay, I'm gonna show it. Maybe if I was like 13, I would show it to my friends. But I am an adult now, and no one cares. And that's really sad. No one complimented my haircut.
I would compliment your icon that shows that you beat Emerald Weapon. Don't worry, I'd be there for you.
I definitely have a couple of coworkers who would, out of just politeness, if I was just like, I beat Emerald Weapon in Final Fantasy VII, they're like, yeah, man, good job.
Or at least keep it rolling.
Yeah.
Anything else of note that you think really stands out as a key factor of an excellent fight?
I mean, when a fight is good, a fight is good. Sometimes if you're just if a fight makes you feel good, even if all the other criteria of a good boss fight are not present, then it's good.
Yeah.
Despite it all, it can be good. Even if it should be shit.
Now let's talk about shit.
Let's talk about shit, because there's a lot of bad boss fights.
Yeah.
And I have many examples.
I'm kind of a boss fight hater. I'm realizing that the more I've thought about it. I know.
This is ridiculous. I'm a boss fight lover. My favorite games are just boss fights. My favorite parts of games are boss fights.
Yes, and I can't say I actually hate boss fights, but I'm like, when I was doing some research for this podcast, I was like, wait a minute. I don't really care about bosses that much, which is really weird for the kind of games that I like. But I think I'll kind of talk more about that when I talk about my favorite fights, because you can kind of pick up on what my tastes are.
Elden Ring enjoyer with 5 kabillion boss fights.
Love Elden Ring. Hate all this.
All with 15 combo attack chains and 2 fucking picoseconds of a window for you attack.
Mesmer from the DLC, contender for favorite boss fight of all time. But it's
Insanity.
a little too early to tell. Gotta play it again.
Dancing Lion.
Dancing Lion? Better the second time.
Is that what it's called? Dancing Lion?
No. Ancestral Beast or some shit.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about gimmicks.
Okay.
I hate boss fights that are just gimmicks. My biggest complaint, this is the cardinal sin for a video game. If your video game does this, and I'm reviewing it, minimum 1 point taken off the final score. If the final boss is something where you're like, hey, I know you just played 20 hours doing this thing, now do something completely new and different that has nothing to do with the rest of the game. And it happens all the time.
You're right.
The final boss of Breath of the Wild might be the biggest letdown of all time.
It's ridiculous. I would say it's like, we're gonna talk about this later, but it's not even really a boss fight. The game is kind of over. Once you beat Calamity Ganon, the game is kind of over. You do what was it? The big beast Ganon. What's the actual name of the final boss?
Dark Beast
Ganon. Yeah. Dark Beast Ganon is not even a fight. It's like a cinematic moment. But they really botched it. They really botched that one. But Calamity Ganon is okay, I guess. It is are you talking about Calamity Ganon or are you talking about Dark Beast Ganon?
I'm talking about Dark Beast Ganon.
Okay, I think Calamity Ganon is fine. I do think it's actually kind of lame that if you play the game properly, it deletes half the fight. I think that's sincerely lame, honestly, because then it's just kind of like a pushover. But it's
but how cool is it when it happens though?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's weird that he's like a goo monster spider thing, but I guess they fixed it in Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, that's another final boss fight that I'm like, I'm not disappointed by this. This is just competent. The coolest part about it is the health bar.
Yeah. Oh, in the Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, sorry, Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah, that has a really that's a wicked moment. That's just where did that come from, man? But it works so well because every single person who plays the game just goes huh? You say gimmick boss fight. Ceaseless Discharge. Just gonna throw that out there.
Fuck is that?
Ceaseless Discharge from Dark Souls 1.
I don't even remember what that is. I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, because he's nothing. He's a nothing.
Oh, is that like the giant sludge man?
Yeah, the huge thing that you find, and he's just sitting still, and then you pick up like the Fire Keeper set or something like that, and then he becomes hostile, and he just like swings his arms around, and you don't even really you don't have to fight it. I mean, you could fight it, but like you do like no damage to him, and then once you hit him like, I don't know, a couple of times, he like starts slipping off the edge, and then you hit him while he's hanging off the edge, and he falls and dies.
Yeah, I don't like that. Or in Demon Souls, the big dragon fight, where it's kind of a similar thing, where you're like in a corridor, and he like throws his hand up, and you gotta smack his hand a few times.
Oh yeah. You talking about Dragon God?
Maybe.
Is it?
I really don't remember a lot of boss fights. I don't commit them to memory. I don't know what it is.
Is it the one that punches you the fuck out in the beginning of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Dragon God, and then you just have to walk around the arena and like press a switch that like shoots something into it that takes away like a chunk of his HP instead of having like a real fight. They Dark Souls does that, I think. There's a fight that does that shit. A lot of Dark Souls games have like that fight, you know?
Yeah, and then there's the ones where it's like the floating stingrays from Demon Souls, or Rykard from Elden Ring, where it's like, here's a really cool weapon that you don't really need to do anything and you just win.
Yeah. The was it Giant Yorm from Dark Souls 3 does that shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dark Souls 3 has the best boss fight. Well, that's not true. Dark Souls 3 has Dark Souls in general has like really good boss fights, and then like peppered in like some of the shittiest fights you've ever had in your entire life, and none of them are exempt from it except Sekiro.
Still haven't played it. You get back to that.
You gotta get on that. And that's honestly not even true. I still have never really gotten past Demon of Hatred in Sekiro, and you'll understand one day.
Something else I don't like about boss fights are whenever they're way too repetitive. And I feel like this happens a lot more in 2D games, especially a lot of older games where it's like... and maybe even some of the earlier Castlevanias, I'm not sure. This is just from seeing them in videos. You'll have to tell me if this is true, where it's like, this boss doesn't have too many moves. They're just really hard to dodge, and that's the shtick. Like, a lot of platformers do this. A lot of, like, top-down twin-stick shooters will do this. Bullet Hell, I think, gets a little, excuse, because that's kind of what it is. But whenever the boss isn't really, like... It's not, pattern-based. It's just, here's, like, 4 things it does. Good luck. I don't like that.
Yeah. I am really biased for Castlevania. I think I like the Castlevania boss fights, honestly. But it's an old design philosophy thing where they're just like, they didn't know how to design boss fights, so they're just like, yeah, it's just random bullshit. Here you go. Fuck you. It's like, it's stupid. More and more games. I mean, games are in general much, maybe not easier, but just like more accessible, so that it's not just like bullshit. But it's that has been phased out in video games for like a really long time, I think.
Yeah, except Bull Drum.
Bull Drum is fun. Bull Drum is fun.
I don't think that's what they call it.
It's did you not have fun when we put it in that trap?
I did.
And then killed it within 30 seconds? Yeah.
I did.
That's fun as shit. That's what you're supposed to do. The best part about Bull Drum is not fighting it.
Yeah. What's that say about it, though?
Yeah, it's shit. But it's
we've
so
talked
funny.
a lot about bosses that are way too hard for one reason or another, but I think it's also just as bad to be too easy.
Yeah. A really easy boss fight is just underwhelming. Shit.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, but like the feeling of being underwhelmed by a fight that's supposed to be important might be worse than being overwhelmed by how bad it is.
Yeah, I can't even think of a lot of like really easy boss fights though, that were like not the first fight that you had to do.
I mean, a lot of
Dark Beast game.
A lot of PlayStation games, I feel like a lot of their bosses are just way too easy. God of War.
Oh yeah.
Last of Us. They're supposed to be easy, but it's just kind of
Last of Us is actually in my popular types of boss fights, so we'll actually talk about that later, I think. But yeah, I agree. A lot of those games do that, where they're just like, let's just you ever play like a final boss specifically, and they're just like let's just get this over with, man.
Yeah, that was Dark Souls 1 for me. I first tried it and I was like, this is fine. I just want to be done. I just want to be done.
Yeah, I actually don't like the Gwyn fight like at all.
Yeah,
I think he moves way too quick for how the game has taught me how to react and deal with fights. And also, I'm also just not a fan of Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, that fight was kind of a... It had a lot of emotional baggage for me because that game traumatized me growing up. So finishing it, I was like, I expected to feel like this huge release, and then I first tried the boss and he wasn't even that hard, and I felt just like... It's like when the villain gets revenge and then realizes it's not what they wanted the entire time.
Standing up to dad for the first time.
Yeah. But yeah, that's boss fights right there. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we did it very well. I think the definition of boss fight should be linked to this video.
Mm-hmm. Assholes and all.
Yeah, assholes and all.
So let's just talk about some of our favorite boss fights then. Or like...
I think we should actually just do... Yeah, I put in a section.
Yeah.
We were talking about popular types of boss fights and then giving us our thoughts on them. Because we name-dropped a lot of series, a lot of specific titles. But there is a lot of types of boss fights that I just don't think we fully defined. And originally this section was going to be boss fights in different genres, and then I took that out because that was originally my idea, and then I was like, I think that's silly, because I just don't know what to say, because, you know, when I immediately conceived the idea, I was thinking about shooters, and shooters have some dog water boss fights. Specifically, most of the realistic shooters that try to be realistic in some way or fashion. Doom doesn't do this because it's not trying to be realistic. You're fighting a big demon, so Doom gives you pretty good boss fights. But games like, I don't know, Call of Duty and stuff like that, they don't give you boss fights in a specific way. They either do an onslaught of enemies or just a fucking cutscene. And the onslaught of enemies, I think we're very, very familiar with. Big examples, I think, are like, I don't know, Metro Last Light ends where you're just in a turret. It's just a turret section, and that's it, and the game ends. Bioshock Infinite has a defense segment where you kill a ton of enemies, and then the game ends with a really long cutscene. And then probably the most famous, I think, out of all the examples I just pulled up is the end of The Last of Us, the first Last of Us game, where you're going to the hospital. It's just a ton of enemies. That's all it is. And you can just avoid them all. I have definitely ended a run of The Last of Us by, slowly peeking my way out of the hallway after getting shot in the heart 8 times. But, yeah. But that would be the boss fight, I would say. The last section of The Last of Us is a boss fight in a way, because it is just onslaught of enemies. Would you even classify this as boss fight, Jake? I don't know.
Depends.
I would classify this as boss
when
fight
it comes
because
to,
it's the final challenge.
Yeah, when it comes to onslaught of enemies, I think it's a... Because obviously the definition of boss fight doesn't matter, but I think there is a difference that we need to make here. Because sometimes it's like The Last of Us. There are a set number of enemies that you have to fight in order to finish this game. And even The Last of Us, I wouldn't really count that as a boss fight. I think that's just another area that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be a little weird thematically to have Joel fighting like a bloater or like a rat king or something right before the end of The Last of Us, if you know what happens.
You think it would be fitting, or you would?
It would not. I don't think it would fit. So I kind of understand why they didn't do that.
Well, there's just not. The thing is, it doesn't fit because it's also there's no villain. There's no big bad at the end of The Last of Us. Well, there is. It's Joel. So unless Joel is I don't know, looking in a mirror going I shouldn't do that, and then he fights himself. He's Dark Link or some shit. It just doesn't work. Last of Us 2 not only does Last of Us 2 do boss fights, it has multiple boss fights. They're pretty good, and there's the best boss fight in the game, which is Ellie, which is actually a boss fight where they take away your shit and you have to stealth around. That is a good boss fight, IMO. And then there is a different type of boss fight at the very end of the game. Spoiler alert, where you're fighting, it's Abby versus Ellie again, and it's just a really depressing slap fight, essentially.
That's kind of just a quick time event.
It is a quick time event, but that is a popular type of boss fight, unfortunately. The quick time event is a very convenient way to end your game. And so sorry to say, Jake, Halo 4 ends with a QuickTime event, but it's fine.
It's pretty anticlimactic, despite being the most climactic thing on screen. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So,
Yeah,
okay,
I mean, yeah. What?
go on. Finish your
I was gonna say, I mean, Halo 3 doesn't have a boss fight at the end. It just has the Warthog run, and that's like the best ending in video games ever.
Yeah, true.
So it's like, I don't know, Halo 4. It's. I like the Halo 4 ending quite a bit, but like the final cut, like QuickTime event is really funny. Whenever I think of the end of Halo 4, I think of football, and you will understand when we get to it.
Excellent. So we already talked about puzzle enemies with Zelda, right?
We did. I mean, we touched upon it, but I think we should bring up other examples because I mean, Zelda obviously, I think it does it the best and the most famous. But those are really just most of the classic Zeldas do that. Some Zelda games don't do that. You know, the last two, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, don't do that. Majora's Mask.
Tears of the Kingdom kind of does.
Yeah, I guess
Some of
that's true. I'm not gonna lie, Tears of the Kingdom boss fights are not really up in my dome. Well, actually, no, I'm remembering them now. They're pretty cool.
You have to use your summons to kind of figure out the little puzzle for most of them.
I'm thinking about Colgera, where I thought it looked like Colgate. That was funny to me. But most of the classic Zeldas do that like puzzle thing where it's like you have to figure out how to get its opening up and then do it. Surprisingly, oddly enough, Majora's Mask does not do that. You can just start fucking swinging at most bosses in Majora's Mask, and they just like go down. And we were talking about boss fights that go on like way too long and are super repetitive. Majora's Mask 3D Twin Mold. They updated that boss. They changed that boss in the 3D version for some reason, where you put on the giant's mask and you get like really big, and you start doing wrestling moves on the enemy, and it's like they just like fucked up something where you just don't do enough damage. So you do like the same QuickTime event like 6 times. It's really, really weird.
Damn.
It's really, really, really weird. And every time I play the game, I'm like, am I doing something wrong? And I look it up online, and there's so many articles be like Twin Mold doesn't die. There's so many forum posts about that shit because it's like that much of an issue. It isn't even just like, oh, you may not experience that. You will experience that. You will be playing the game and go, this does not feel right because someone fucked up something. There is an internal clock in humans, and many living creatures have an internal clock that like just does this shit where your body and your brain go, this doesn't feel right anymore. And it's shared in like so many people. It's shared in so many like people for some reason for the same shit with no like learning or previous connections or contexts. Like random people will have the same exact feeling for the same exact shit. This is one of them. I can't believe no one on the dev team was like, this feels like fucking dog shit. Cannot believe it. It's built in us as humans. I'm done. All right. It is.
That was me with the guy in Metal Gear that I can't remember his name.
What the
ninja
fuck are you
guy.
talking about? Oh, Gray Fox?
Ray Fox in Metal Gear Solid.
I'm excited
I played that fight for like 5 minutes. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. Looked
Yes.
it up. It's right.
It's right. Yeah, sometimes it just is like that, and you just gotta fucking deal. But another example of puzzle fights, final boss fights in Portal and Portal 2. Those are puzzles in a way. They're like, you know, minor traversal puzzles, but those are puzzles. And then many of the fights in Shadow of the Colossus do the same shit that Zelda does. A lot of the boss fights in Shadow of the Colossus are just like you can just fight it for the very beginning, just start climbing it. But many of them you do have to find a way to climb it, and it can be very frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
But a big shout out to like the one small Colossus that chases you around a big arena and you have to climb on like pillars and it's just smacks
there's the
pillar.
pig one.
Yeah. That one is probably the biggest example of like a puzzle or the bull type thing, or maybe it's not like the bull, but the one that you need to take a torch and back it up over an edge, and then his like back breaks, and then the fight's over. Once you
and there's the big like electric one that it's kind of like a building, like a tower, and you have to climb up. That
like the ending.
Very more. Is that the last one?
It's like the really tall one.
Yeah. And there's lightning and everything.
Yeah, that's the ending.
Yeah, he's kind of a puzzly one.
He is. He doesn't like throw you off. Most of the Shadow of the Colossus fights, like they find a way to like throw you off. But once you get to the top of him, once you get to the top of the final boss in Shadow of the Colossus, it's over. Unless you fall off somehow, which I just don't think will happen. But yeah.
I'm sure I could find a way.
Yeah, I did it once, actually. I'm full of shit.
Yeah, I like puzzle boss fights, but it depends. Like, the Zelda ones, I think, are a good example of, like, this isn't really a fight, it's just a puzzle.
Yeah.
But weirdly enough, the Portal ones are more of a fight a lot of the times.
You think so?
I do, because in Portal and Portal 2, those fights are, like, they don't feel good to play. They just feel wrong, because you're like, aiming a weapon. Like, most of the time you're aiming a bomb, or like aiming, or like trying to...
You just pick shit up and put it down.
Yeah, I mean, that's Portal 1 really, but I'm thinking more of Portal 2 where you like try to aim the bombs. Or even in Portal 1 where you're aiming the rockets and everything.
Yeah.
It makes you feel icky for how the rest of the game is not that.
I don't understand.
You don't understand?
I don't understand what you mean. I don't feel icky when I do that.
I feel icky doing it. Like, I don't... In no other part of Portal or Portal 2 am I like... I guess there's parts of Portal 2 where you're, like, aiming the laser to take out turrets. But most of the time, you're not, like, aiming something to hit something else. Like, that is not common. And when it does happen, you're like, this is weird.
When you were in elementary school, did, like, a bully, like, come up to you and say, like, this is a boss fight, and, like, punch you in the head or something? I feel like you're traumatized about boss fights for some reason.
No, I'm not. I didn't say I don't like it. I played the Portal. I played Portal and Portal 2 probably, like, 50 times each. I play those boss fights a lot, and every time I do them, I'm like, this is weird.
That's so strange.
This is weird.
That is really strange. I don't know. I understand. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I do kind of understand, because you are kind of just like, you're not really solving a puzzle. You are, but like now you're on the offense now, and that's not right.
Yeah, like Portal 2 more so than 1, you are puzzling with like the gels and trying to get to the cores and stuff. In Portal 1, it really is just like, all right, now I gotta line up this rocket to blast GLaDOS in the face.
I actually have not played Portal 1, if you can believe it.
What the fuck is wrong?
I just don't. Okay, when I was a kid, I played a lot of Portal 2, and then I went over to my friend's house, and he was like, dude, you play Portal 2, but have you played Portal 1? And like, we proceeded to play through it and beat it in a single night, like within like, I think 50 minutes. And I was just like, that's it? Because Portal 1 is like a strange game, because it almost feels like it should be like a $10 indie game in a way.
Yeah.
Because there's just nothing to it. There's just nothing to it. You know?
There's a lot to it.
There is
to it, but it is short.
But it's like the puzzle. Like Portal 2 has so much to it. It's like, oh, we got GLaDOS, and we got Wheatley, and we got Cave Johnson, and we got all these different areas, and we got the propulsion gel. We got all this shit. But Portal 1 is just a very contained puzzle game where you just like murder a big robot at the end. And you know what? That's it. That's all it has to be.
I still play Portal 1 at least once a month, all the way through.
Once a month? That's crazy.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll play Portal 2 instead, but that's a bigger commitment.
Portal 2 is a bigger commitment, but, you know, perfection does that.
Yeah. Whenever I have a bad day, I play Portal 2, and usually I just play from, like, the opening sequence through probably, like, falling into Old Aperture, and then, like, I'm good. I feel better now.
That's a pretty hefty segment. It's like
it is.
A lot
Takes
of
a while.
It's like a third at least.
I've got it down to, like, a couple hours, though.
Yeah. I gotta play Portal 2 again.
This isn't the Portal episode, though. This is about boss
fights.
You're
so fucking right.
I'm talking about cutscene boss fights. I feel like you have strong feelings about these.
Cinematic fights or just a fucking cutscene? There's a difference.
There's a difference. There's a difference. Take it how you would like. Which one would you like, Tom?
Well, I did mention just a fucking cutscene, because some boss fights are literally just a fucking cutscene. And by boss fights, I mean it's just like you take out the big bad and the game ends in a cutscene, and I will refer to it as a boss fight because, like, I mean that's like the closest we're gonna get for some of these games. Most of the Call of Duty games do this, except for, like, I don't know. A big exception goes to Colonel Shepard in Modern Warfare 2, where you're pulling that knife out of your chest. That's sick as fuck. I don't give a shit. I think it's cool as fuck. But like all the other Call of Duty games, like mostly are just like maybe a quick time event. But I'm thinking, I think in Black Ops 2, it's just a cutscene, and then you have to like make a choice on whether or not you like dome Menendez in the skull, and then the game ends, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, I think Call of Duty kind of... I wish it would care less, because like you can't have a boss fight at the end of one of those games where you shoot Menendez 1,000 times with your MP5, because it just doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense. But games have done that, and it's really weird and funny because you just hear like I'm thinking this does not happen. Or no, it kind of does happen in like games like Borderlands, where you do the Handsome Jack fight and you just shoot him like 80,000 times. He goes, "Ooh, ah, oh!" When you're like, "I am shooting you in the skull with a gun. You're dead. You are dead." So, but like that shit happens in a lot of older games, and it's really silly. But I feel like most games don't just do the cutscene because they know that they can't just end the game on like a cutscene. They have some type of. Most of them end it with a, as I said, QuickTime event. Or horde of enemies. But let's talk about cinematic, quote, fights. And the biggest example that I can bring up right now is the final Sephiroth fight in Final Fantasy VII.
That's like a real fight, though.
Save for Sephiroth and Bizarro Sephiroth are, but the actual like final Sephiroth fight, like that when you're in like Cloud's like psyche, that's just like not a fight. It's just like a game just ends.
Yeah, but okay, that's like a QuickTime. That's a QuickTime event before they had QuickTime events, which is also not true. But
elaborate, elaborate on that.
I mean, you go in there, your limit gets charged instantly, you hit attack, and then you win. Like you can't.
Yeah, okay, but it's okay. Don't call it a QuickTime event.
But like
because first of all, because because QuickTime event has like the implication that something bad is gonna happen if you don't do it, and that just doesn't happen, and that you can't lose that fight.
Okay, you're right.
And also, then we could also say that all of Final Fantasy VII is a QuickTime event because our meter charges and then we have to hit the attack button.
I heard that online before, and it makes me so mad.
Every game is a QuickTime event if you really think about it.
Yeah. No, okay, I just mean
unless
like,
there's a pause button.
There's like a difference between that at the Sephiroth fight and like a whole ass fight being that, like The Last of Us 2.
Okay, that's true. How about, let me give you something else. Undertale. Photoshop Flowey.
That's a real fight, though. That is a real fight.
You can't die.
Well,
it's
yeah,
just
you
there
can.
for like cinematic. Can you? You just get revived immediately.
Yeah, but you still start the fight over.
I don't think you do. I've never had. What? You start a fight over? I've never had to start a fight over. I just had to start from like the section that I died at.
Once you get to a certain point, I think it does that. Yeah, but even then, it's like you're just checkpointing it. It's not like you. Yeah. It's not like it literally doesn't matter.
Also, Undertale. I actually don't think. I think you're supposed to die like once or twice in the Photoshop Flowey fight. Like definitely. I always die at least once in the Photoshop.
I mean, I always die. Yeah, but like it's checkpointed, but it's not like you're. It's not like you just keep rolling.
That's what it feels like. I feel like I just kind of had to. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad fight.
It's a pretty bad fight.
Oh well, I don't think that. I think it's like completely nuts, which I think is like really cool to just end your game like that. But like, you really kind of just barrel through it. IMO, at least I usually do. Like I don't think about it. But then again, Undertale is like extremely easy after you play it like once. So it's not like, I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
There's no like lose. I guess I'm thinking that there's like a lose condition. I think there's no lose condition.
I mean, but there kind of is though in that one.
I suppose. I just think it's so much lower stakes than every other lose condition in that game.
Yeah, there's no walk back or anything.
Yeah, but if that doesn't do it for you, Resident Evil 7 Eveline, end of the game. After you get to you may not remember this because
I remember.
Okay, you do. After you get to the mines, which is onslaught of enemies, you fight Evelyn, who you just stand at the back end of a wall and just like hold down the fire button, and then the game ends. That is also like such a non-fight. It's like, okay, if you somehow don't do enough damage, you get 8, which may or may not have happened when we played it. I feel like did I die when we did that somehow?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I feel like I dreamt it.
VR nonsense.
Yeah. But anyway, like that is like such a non-fight, which is really unfortunate because Resident Evil does have some pretty good boss fights. Resident Evil 7 has some pretty good boss fights, and then they just kind of end the game with like just put your back against the wall and fire. There's just nothing, you know.
There's also that one, the final shot you take with the Wesker. Is that you control that, or is that all cutscene?
You do control that. And would that be a quick time event? No, I don't think. No, that wouldn't be a quick time event. I don't think. But like, it is a way to end the game. I think that's fine. I think like cinematically, it's a fine fight, but it is like like once you actually like finish and get through like the wall where she's just a big wall and she has a big face on a wall, and then you like pull out the Wesker, like that's cool. That's fine. I'm fine with games that like give you the final boss and then the actual like killing of the final boss is like some type of cutscene in a way.
I think that might be like the best possible way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Like things like Kid Icarus Uprising does that, where you do actually fight a boss, and then the actual finale is you just dodging everything while you're all like fucked up, and you got this big gun and you're just charging like this final shot, and all you have to do is dodge. Like I think that's fine because there was a fight right before that at least, and now it's because I think it would be because when you do that, when you do a non-cinematic final boss, you do run the risk of you ending it in like a really anticlimactic way, or the boss fight just being shit. So in a way, a cinematic boss fight is like a fail-proof, well, not fail-proof, but it is a very safe way of having the end of the game feel like an end, instead of you like, I don't know, accidentally fucking up the final boss and then it's just like nothing. You're like, oh.
Yeah, I think games with a lot of combat, there should be a little bit of, I mean, it can be a cutscene, it doesn't have to be like a quick time event, but I like it when there's a little bit of like oomph right after you beat it, where you still feel like you're in it kind of, and the final hit is like some crazy... have you seen the final boss for FF16 yet?
I have not, no.
Okay, well there's a really cool like cinematic moment right after you beat the final boss, because the final boss fight is a little janky, and then you get into this cool cinematic moment, and it's like a really, really nice way to cap it off. If they just ended it with like, you do the final hit on the boss and then it goes straight to the cutscene after that, it wouldn't have hit at all.
Yeah. It's really, really effective. And I think like, again, not every game does it, but a lot of games like do that, where it makes you still feel like you're in the fight, and it's very dramatic for you. I'm thinking like, I don't know, Tears of the Kingdom kind of ends like that, where you're on the weak point and you pull out the sword and you like slap it in. Like that's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe shit like that. But I don't know, sometimes it could be overdone. I can understand. Like, it's not all games need it. Do the roguelikes need it? Probably not. But do games that want to be cinematic and make it like a really, really big moment, and there's a chance that you could not have it be a big moment and you just kind of like fizzles out? Yeah. Like, I don't know. Dark Souls 3 ends, most of the Souls games end, and they can end with you just doing like the dinkiest little hit, like one damage, throwing like a pot at the final boss, and it just like ends. And it's like, okay, because then you just
mimic tier hits the enemy and you're not even there.
Yeah, and you just stand there in silence while a cutscene doesn't even play. Like immediately, it just shows the boss like slumping down and then vanishing, and then the cutscene will play. Like I kind of like it when a cutscene plays as soon as you like smack the final boss, because it's just like immediate payoff. Sometimes the Souls games do that shit where you're just like, I guess it's to make you be like, oh man, that was really tough. You know, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, cinematic cutscenes. They can be good, they can be bad. I think they're more good than they are bad. It really just like depends. At least for the first time you play a game, I think a cinematic cutscene really works. And I think people complain a lot about specifically, I see a lot of people complain about the Sephiroth final boss, because it's just like it's absolutely like a non-fight. But like the first time you play it, you're like, oh, I'm so in it.
I really disagree with that for that fight specifically, because like that's not a fight. That is just a cinematic. Like I don't know why people would be upset by that. People
are just like, because they just get that expectation in their head where you're just like, oh, this is gonna be so sick, and then it's like not really a fight to them. Like they build up that they're gonna have like a back and forth fight and not just Omni-slash Sephiroth's like brainworm to death. But I don't know.
Well,
it's
those
a matter
people are
of
like psychotic and like masochists, because that fight is already like 3 phases.
Yeah, it is a lot. But yeah, so, I mean, I'm just saying, this is just the complaints I read online. I think it's pretty silly as well.
There's another type of fight I want to talk about, and I just don't really know what to call it. So you'll see on the notes, I just wrote Bowser.
Yeah, what?
It's okay. I'm gonna explain this type of fight to you, and you need to help me find a category for it.
All right, I'm gonna close.
It is a fight where the hard part, the challenge, the meat of what you're doing in the fight is just getting to the boss, and then all you have to do is hit them once, and then you reset, and then you do that 3 times. maybe 4 times, and then you win. Like in Mario. The hard part of the bosses in Mario is platforming through their little obstacles, and then you hit them on the head, and then you reset, and you do that 3 times.
I'm remiss to call it a puzzle fight. Because
it
in my
isn't,
head,
right?
it is not. I wouldn't say it is, but that's kind of like presentation-wise, because when you say this, I think of Bed of Chaos in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Where you just have to go to different sections of the map and then hit some shit until you go to the final section and hit once and it dies. And in my head, I was thinking like that's a puzzle thing, but it's really not a puzzle thing. I mean, we can give it its own name. I think it's just a boss fight because it is just a challenge. It not necessarily, you're not fighting the boss necessarily, but you are performing and taking on a challenge that will take out the boss. So I think it is just like a boss fight, but we can make up our own name right now. What is it, platform boss fight, I guess?
Yeah, but it's not always platformers that do it. You know?
Yeah. There is a lot of boss fights that it's just like go-to thing and activate like thing. And I guess
and I'm not even. I think Bowser might be a bad example. Maybe just like
accurate.
A Koopling is what I'm thinking of, because I'm not even thinking of like OG Bowser, like jump on the axe. I'm thinking like Mario 64. Like the goal is to get to the boss. When you get to the boss, as long as you're close to them and you hit the button, you do the thing.
Well, I think Mario 64 has a real final boss. You have to grab his tail and throw him.
Yeah, but like the hard part of doing it is getting to his tail. Like you very rarely fuck it up. And like, okay, New Super Mario Bros. Is probably the best example then. For like the Kooplings and all that stuff. You get to them, you jump on their head, you dodge their little shell attacks, and then you jump on their head again.
Well, that's the thing. I think this is where we're gonna have trouble with like definitions, because I do think that stuff like that is still boss fight. It's just like you just found it disappointing because it was too easy. You know, like just because the way to Bowser, like Bowser's Darklands, was harder than the actual Bowser fight, doesn't make Bowser's Darkland a boss fight. It just like happened to just be that way. It's the final level, and then the boss fight was just easier. You know.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it would be fair to be like, well, this didn't live up to my expectations, or this was too easy for me, so I have decided to name the level of the boss fight instead, you know? Okay, like, when you say that, I'm thinking of the ending of 3D Worlds, where there isn't really a fight, you just climb that tower, and then hit the bell thing at the very end, and the fight ends. Like, that's what I'm thinking of in my head, where you're just avoiding Bowser while you're climbing a tower, and then you just hit one thing, and it's over.
Okay, I think. Okay, first off, this don't matter. None of this matters. This is stupid. Yeah. Like clearly this is not important. Yeah. But I think we're having some. I think there's some stuff getting lost in translation here.
Okay.
Have you played Celeste?
I have.
Okay, the Battle Line boss fight at the very end of the game.
Battle Line. I forgot that's what she was called. That's a good name.
The meat of what you do in that fight is just you start at the beginning of the screen, and she attacks you. You get to her, and when you hit her, she takes damage and moves to another area, and then you have to get there. I'm not talking like the level itself leading up to the boss. I mean like in the boss fight, all you have to do is hit them once, and then they move to the next phase.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think this is very similar to what I just said with the Bowser in 3D World, where you're not getting to it. It's like a variation of it. You're avoiding Bowser until you can get the thing that destroys him. You know, I think that's very similar to this Battle Line fight, where I'm remembering it now, where you do have to go through kind of like a regular level in a way. Like you are just playing the game as you've normally played it. But Battle Line is like shooting fucking lasers at you, and then you attack her, and it's like a cinematic, like a whole cinematic thing. I guess I would just call it as like a traversal, like boss fight, like traversal.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, like what is it, Mirror's Edge?
Mirror's Edge.
Yeah, I mean the final boss fights in those final boss fights, quote unquote, in those games are just like a really intense challenge. That's it. So I think that's it would be like a traversal fight. And this is some shit that's like I think it's like this is the mega niche shit. Yeah. Give me that niche shit because like I think those are few and far between. But
I kind of like them though. I like them a lot. I'm gonna say I like them a lot.
I agree. They can be good. They can be really, really good.
The portal ones are also kind of that in a way, but you're also aiming a gun, which is really weird.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of this is really semantics.
Oh, all of it is. Like I said, none of this matters.
Yeah, this is Semantics, the podcast.
This is just a podcast where we list shit.
This is
That's all this is.
No, that's a real podcast already, and that's no one's
Podcast
favorite.
about lists?
Yes, so we can't, that we would get copyrighted for that. But we could say that we're a podcast about semantics.
We are. We're a podcast about semantics.
It's like philosophy. You know when you took like, did you take philosophy in college?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know in philosophy where it's just like, there was no answer. It's just talk, and then, you know, you get credit for just having a stance and defending it.
Yeah.
It's kind of what it is. Because, like, the next day, Miyamoto could come out and be like, this is the new boss fight definition that I've created right now, the traversal boss fight, and this is how it's defined, and that becomes, like, a real thing in gaming, and it's just like, well, that's just what it is now. You know, we don't have any power, so nothing we says matters. But, like, someone who's important can start saying some shit, and then we would all take it as gospel, because that's just how it works.
If Miyamoto made a dictionary of video game terms, people would abide by it. Like, no one would even question it.
People would. And we would get only those games for probably, like, 6 years.
Yeah.
So, until someone makes a game that is, like, moderately unique, and then everyone is like, oh my god. Did you see what this guy did? Now let's make that game 5 more times for 5 years.
Battle Royale. Oh, man.
Dude.
So I think we pretty well covered the genre of boss that is just huge dude, Souls-like boss. I don't really know if there's anything else to add to that.
No, I think that's right.
Certainly its own thing nowadays of Souls-like fight. You know, you walk into the arena, big health bar comes up, music goes, ooh, and then this dude stands at the other end of the arena, and you gotta fight him for
all you have to do is, like, hit the Dragonator, and it blows up or something. That's kind of what it reminds me of. I mean, the Crisis 2 ends like that. Crisis 2 ends with you just, like, activating a terminal, and then the game ends, and you're like, what? Huh? So it's like, I don't know.
How do you feel about boss fights that are either like a character that does all the exact same things that you do, or a character that could feasibly be a player character? How do you feel about that?
I think those... I mean, it's really popular. I think they're really good. Close to being overdone in a way. But those are usually a lot of fun. I think they really have to lean into it if they're going to do some shit like that. I mean, let's think about it. What games do this? The Souls games do it.
Dark Link.
Dark Link is... Dark Link, actually, now that you think about it, Dark Link is actually a non-puzzle fight in Ocarina of Time. I've been playing that game my whole life. I still don't really know how Dark Link functions. Every time I play that game, I really don't know what I'm doing whenever I fight Dark Link. It's very confusing, and you can just cheese him very easily. Dark Souls 3 ends with, literally don't remember the name of the Soul of Cinder, and that's just kind of like, it's like not even a character. It's just a representation of, like, the player character of the Souls games. You know, they do that shit. I mean, like, what? Oh, you have any other examples, like, really off the top of your head?
Isn't there in one of the older God of Wars you fight, or maybe is it Ragnarok? I don't know. Isn't there one where you fight yourself? Did I make that up?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it was some, like, shenanigans. I mean, like, when I think there's some boss fights that do that shit, but they really make it like this is pretty much you or a version of you. Like, they do almost all the same things as you. Lady Maria in Bloodborne kind of does that. A game that doesn't do this, but you would think it does it. Dark Pit in Kid Icarus Uprising. He does function in the same way, but there is a lot of, like, traversal not puzzles, but, like, you know, you fight him in an arena for a little bit, and then he, like, launches himself over to another part of the map, and he snipes you from a distance. You can't do that shit, but once you actually get to him, he fights exactly like you, essentially. I think those are really cool. Those are really cool if they're fun. If they're not fun, if they don't, like, actually play well, and they're, like, really fucking frustrating, because if they're really frustrating and they do all these same shit you do, there is a solid chance that it is extremely frustrating. You're just like, fuck this shit. I'm actually overpowered as hell. And now that I'm fighting a guy who is as overpowered as me, I hate this. Rogue Legacy does that, but it's not really frustrating. It just does that. It's a popular thing to do. It's like, fighting yourself.
Yeah. The big example that I can't believe neither of us thought of yet is fighting games. Like pretty much all of them do that. I'm thinking of Persona 4 Arena, where they do the whole, shadow version of yourself.
Yeah,
the
shadow. I mean, that really is just like completely on the nose. Like that's exactly what they are. Like in and out. Like from the design phase, they're just, this is you.
Yeah.
But you know what? That actually wanted me to bring it up. Fucking fighting games do boss fights, and they're always terrible. And it's true. Always.
Well, a lot of them are kind of supposed to be super bosses.
Yeah, and they suck.
Yeah. I'm thinking of final boss of Mortal Kombat 11 sticks out as a recent example, but then
Kronika is really bad. Corrupted Shinnok is really bad. Shao Kahn in 9 is really fucking bad.
And then they always make them a character
bullshit.
that you can play as, and they don't do any of the shit that you hated whenever you fought them.
You're like, what is this? I don't know what fucking drugs they're on when they make the final bosses or just any of like the big bosses in fighting games, because they always just make it some stupid shit that does not abide by the rules that you spend most of the game doing. It's like, okay, this is kind of like an important point actually, because it's like sometimes a final boss or a boss in general will be like, these are the rules that you just learned, we're not going to do that right now. And the line between whether or not this is going to be bullshit or actually fun is actually if it's, I would say, difficult or not. I usually, more or less, it's whether or not it's difficult. Because if you're going to take away all the shit that I know how to do, and then you make me fight this guy that does none of the things that I'm used to, you're going to go, this sucks. But if you take away all the shit that I normally do, if you're like, your character can only do super powered punches, but you just make it like really easy, and it's like just funny and just fun to do, then that could be a good boss fight. Like, is it actually a good boss fight when you think about, like, challenges and all the criteria that makes it a good boss fight? No, but, like, I had fun, It's
all the best.
Yeah, it's just, like, I don't know. I hate boss fights in fighting games. Always terrible. I can't think of one that's... He's fine. I think Smash boss fights are fine.
I think the Master Fortress from Smash Wii U is the weirdest boss fight of all time.
That is so right. I forgot about Master Fortress.
This is the strangest boss fight of all time. It's
super strange, and honestly, I don't know if it's that good. I was always like,
it's not that good.
Whenever I played Smash Wii U and I had the difficulty up for me to fight Master Fortress, I was always like, ugh, ready for this shit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, I have them here, raid bosses. I don't really think either of us are equipped to speak on raid bosses.
No, I played Destiny once, and I hated it. I hated the raid bosses in Destiny.
And then I played Destiny 2 a lot, but I never did a raid.
I mean, I'm sure they're fun if you play MMOs. But I don't play MMOs. I don't have the capacity for that shit. I did at one point really want to get into World of Warcraft, but I mean, that really dedicates... You got to have so much of your time dedicated to that game, and I'm not a one-game type of guy.
Yeah.
Unless it's Pizza Tower. Yeah, that's it. Unless it's Pizza Tower.
Do you think you play Pizza Tower for the rest of your life and be happy?
No, probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do any. I don't know.
Congrats on the stream, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I was horrific. I don't know how you do it, man.
It was not horrific. It was.
I don't know how you. No, it's horrific for me because I was like reading and it was just threw me for such a loop. It was fun. Don't get me wrong. It was fun, but like I felt like I was learning a different language. Trying to play the game and like read the chat. I don't know how you do that. I was so impressed that you're.
It really is. It is like speaking a language. There's a learning curve, and it is something that definitely gets in the way a lot.
Yeah, I was also super close to my monitor because I wanted to get close to my microphone, and I just like I'm just not this close to my monitor all the time, so I couldn't see shit ahead of me in Pizza Tower because I did not have the full range of it. It was a nightmare for me, in like a funny way. But, the people who watched it, they had fun. So I'm glad they had fun. I will not be playing a game like that for a while. I think the next time I stream, I'm just going to do some actual computer games.
And what is the Twitch handle for those listening at home?
The Twitch handle is master_moth. It's a little cringe of a name, but Yeah.
Nah, that's cool.
It was originally going to be King Crab, but someone took that.
Where'd that come from?
King Crab?
Yeah.
That's what my name was going to be.
Yeah, but like, where did that come from?
Oh, I don't know. I just thought I think a king crab is a real animal, and I just think that's cool as shit. And I love alliteration, and I love crabs.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Love crabs.
So, I also love crab. I'm having crab next week, and I'm very excited for it. I have some boss fights that I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about that I would just really like to talk about.
I would like you to talk about what the hell Devola and Popola are.
Shut the fuck up.
What is that?
Don't say the words if you don't know how to say it.
Did I say it wrong?
Yes, it's Devola and Popola, one of the best boss fights in the history of gaming. One of the final bosses in Nier Replicant.
Oh, okay.
They're recurring characters that also show up in Nier Automata. And as someone who fell in love with Nier Automata and knew these characters, going to play Replicant years later, there's this, and this is a story of a boss fight that does not need all of the aspects to be good. This is almost entirely based on music and combat being balanced. There is a song in your Replicant that plays from the opening. Well, there's like this crazy opening, but after that, you get into the meat of the game. There's a song that you hear probably every hour. It's a beautiful song. It's called Song in the Ancients, I believe. It's in Automata as well. It's kind of like the theme song for the game. And you hear it in one form for a very long time. Then after a certain point in the game, you hear a different version of that song sung as a duet between these two characters. Ooh, and you're like, wow, this is like representing, I've grown, I've changed, these characters are here now, things are more beautiful now that I have all my friends in my life. And then you get to a point where you have to fight them. And it's one of the most emotional moments in the game because it's one of those fights where, in story-wise, like an anime moment of neither of us want to fight each other, but we have to kind of situation. And it plays this duet again, but it's a boss fight version of it, and it just brought me to tears. I had to pause and stop playing because I couldn't see the boss fight because I was crying so much.
Oh my god.
And then, I don't want to spoil everything about it, but then you get to the second phase of the fight, and it goes back to the first version you ever heard. And it hits so hard that I cried again, and I couldn't stop crying.
Plin plin plons.
Oh man, it's such a beautiful moment in a game that is just so hard to get to that point, but it's so worth it when you do. It's hard to recommend that game to people, but it's for moments like that I know, like, if you stick it through, you're gonna love that game.
I mean, I own both of them, so I'm getting on it.
And it's just such a hard sell to tell you to play Replicant first because it is not as good as Automata by leagues. It is a bad game in many ways, but it has these moments that just are so impactful that it kind of doesn't have to be a great game for me to love it. And
fortunately for you, that's never stopped me before, and I will be starting with Replicant.
I'm scared because I'm worried that you're not going to like it, and then you're not going to see it through.
Do you know who you're talking to?
Yes, I know who I'm talking to, but I'm more referencing that I'm worried you're going to play Replicant and not like it, and then not want to play Automata because of that.
You see the shit I do?
Okay.
I played through every Mega Man game, man. That shit sucked. There was like 5 games in a row that were like 4s. And I still kept doing it. So don't worry. Well, I will play your favorite game of all time. Or one of your favorite games of all time.
And just, I guess it's now a spoiler that you're going to fight these characters at some point, but
I'll forget.
It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. I'm very excited to play both of those games for all the hype you've given. And also this Testament. I do love a really beautiful fight. I'll let you know if I cry during it. I don't think I have. Last time I don't cry during video games because I'm locked in. I do cry at the end of games. We should do an episode just on things we cried over.
I'd love that because I have a lot of examples.
Yeah, and Final
they're
Fantasy
all called
15.
Xenoblade.
Yeah, Xenoblade, and Final Fantasy 15 for me. Waterworks, bro.
Yeah,
can't even handle it.
Do you have any bosses you want to shout out that you haven't had a chance to yet?
No, actually, I just have one game that I just didn't mention. I mentioned the Monster Hunter games. I don't have any specific boss fights that really like stick out to me, to be honest with you. Like that are just like, this is one of my favorite fights ever. Besides, like, I don't know, the final boss of a lot of the classic 3D Zelda games, I really, really like. But, Monster Hunter games, Shadow of the Colossus, The Ellie fight in T-Lao 2 was really, really good. But two that I didn't mention, one of them this is really stupid, but Luigi's Mansion, the Portrait Ghosts, I would consider bosses. Yeah, I do like it. I like it, and that's another example of what I mean. Like, Luigi's Mansion, if you think about it, is mostly just bosses, even if they are, like, most of them are completely non-consequential. But a big one, a game that is only bosses, Punch-Out. And I'm talking about all Punch-Out games, like the NES, Super Punch-Out, and the one for Wii. I really, really like that. You know, all they had to do in the development phase was make a handful of fights, sometimes less than 10 characters, or 10 or above, just like a little bit above 10 characters, and make them have interesting fights. And that's the game. And it is like one of my favorite games of all time because they're just dynamic. They're interesting, they're fun, they're satisfying, and they're challenging. And so all the bosses in Punch-Out get a big shout out. Specifically, Sandman at the end of the first, not the title defense, but the first time you fight Sandman is a crazy fight. So yeah.
I love Punch-Out as well. I probably never would have gotten back into it if you didn't bring it back into my life. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a marvelous game. Who doesn't like silly stereotypes of men saying silly things and then getting punched so hard in the head that they fly backwards and
or
like
smashing you into the ring and then you pass out and die.
Or that where they take out like a chainsaw and they like cut you in half and everyone's like, that's fine, that's legal, but I can't do that shit. Fuck, man. But yeah. That's the only thing I wanted to shout out, honestly.
Yeah, a couple more shout outs for me. Red, the super boss from Pokemon Gold and Silver. This is a sick ass moment.
It is. I like games that this is kind of in conjunction with boss fights that are just you, but games that have the previous protagonist as a boss fight. Sick as fuck.
Yeah, it really is.
Sick as fuck.
Which, it usually hits, but sometimes I'm like, this is cheesy as hell. But for Red, I don't know. Especially when they redid it in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I got so much nostalgia all at once. And it's also a really just generally hard and challenging fight in a good way.
Yeah.
Love it. Shout out to Sans, of course. Can't have a whole episode without talking about Sans.
Sans is pretty magical. I will admit.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
and actually is kind of a fight.
I mean, it's a lot of a fight.
It is a lot of a fight, especially compared to the rest of Undertale, which you could probably beat without getting hit very easily.
Yeah, and I guess shout out to Asriel as well. End of the
Asriel, yes,
pretty good.
Yes, how could you forget? That is a crazy final boss fight as well.
Mm-hmm. And I have on here Father Gascoigne from Bloodborne, and the reason I wrote that is like I need to ask you something because researching for this podcast made me realize, and I alluded to this earlier, there isn't a single boss fight in any of the Souls games that I think of and I think I liked that boss. I can't think of a single fight that I actually liked, but I know I did.
Like, just off the top of your head, you can't even think of it.
No, like, I'll look... Okay, the most recent time I played through Elden Ring, and the most recent time I played through Bloodborne, every time I get to a boss, I'm never excited to fight them. I'm like, okay, here we go.
I was just gonna say, it's the problem with Souls games, and thinking about them fondly, is that you can't, because you're usually just, like, stressed, honestly. Like, whenever you get to a fight, especially, even if you played the game before, many times, whenever you get to the boss fight, you're just like, am I gonna have a really fucking difficult time doing this, or am I gonna get through it, like, normally? Like, there's a certain pacing that is absent in the Souls games that a lot of other games, like, have, and it doesn't really make it a bad thing. Like, the boss fights are, like, most of the time the best fights in the game, but the pacing is, like, just not there because you could just get wrecked for, I don't know, 80 attempts. Unless you are Sekiro. I love all the boss fights in Sekiro.
Okay, and I do want to check it out. It never goes on sale, so that's a problem, but I feel weird because I know that the bosses in Bloodborne are really good. I know that the bosses in Elden Ring are really good. but whenever I go to I think about them, not a single one am I like, yeah, I really enjoyed that fight. And I just, it's a weird, like, it feels like I'm blacked out playing all of them.
I like the crystal people in Elden Ring. I like them.
Fuck the crystal people. What do you mean?
Patches. The one Patches fight.
You fight really Patches in Elden Ring?
You do. You fight him. First time you see him, you get to the end of this like cave, and he's like, "I'm gonna rob you," and then like you hit him twice. He's like, "Okay, stop, please, ow!"
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it's full of shit like that. Let me think. What's a good fight in all the Souls games?
Like, I can't think of a single one that I really liked.
It's a little disappointing when you're like what Soul. The most you can ask for in a Souls game is that you get through it with that incident. Not that it's gonna be fun necessarily. The fun is just an after effect that you get for succeeding, I think.
Yeah, it's just a weird like thing I find with myself. It's not exclusive to the Souls games either. Like, I'm thinking back for this, I could not think of bosses that I am like, that stands out to me as excellent. And even if I know that it's good and like well designed, I don't think about boss fights and try to remember them and like think back to them unless they were cinematic or unless they had a lot of story or emotional impact.
How about Putrid Tree Spirit? What was it? What's it in Elden Ring?
Yeah, that's it. Ulcerated Tree Spirit.
Ulcerated Tree Spirit. That's a shitty Elden Ring boss. That fucking boss sucks.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
Because it's just like
9 million of them.
If it's in like a better arena, it'd probably be fine. But it's in like the most cramped arena. What was it? The Witches of Berwick, Bloodborne.
Yeah, fuck that.
Yeah. Shadows of Yharnam. The giant snakes.
Shadows of Yharnam's actually kind of sick.
You like? Okay. This is a good transition topic. Least favorite boss fights that I have not talked about yet. Almost most of the bosses that are 2 or more individuals. Hate them.
Agreed. We should never do them. Ever.
But we do. But we keep doing them. Sometimes they do it well. Ornstein and Smo, they don't. Okay, when you don't design when you design the enemy to still function as if you're fighting it one-on-one, it's when you shit. It doesn't make any sense. A good boss fight that is actually 2 or more individuals. It's 5. It's 5 people. It might not be 5. It might be 4. It's almost 5 people. Is the Black Rabbit Brotherhood in Lies of P. It is many individuals, and you fight them once. You fight them twice in the game, but the first time you fight them is one dude who's like the main guy, and then he'll have like 3 or 4 smaller guys like tag in and help him like every once in a while. But they don't target you at once. Like they kind of back off a little bit when one of them targets you, the other one kind of backs off. And then if he has like an opportunity, they'll jump in and attack you. But like it's pretty manageable. It seems really stressful, but it's pretty manageable. Second time you fight them, it is like 4 people at once fighting you. But they do the same shit where they don't like spam you and completely gank you. They kind of take turns in a way, but it can very quickly go from like them taking turns and taking a step back to jumping in. But they kind of make it clear that they're going to do that. That's actually a good boss fight that has 2 or more individuals. It is very good. But like shit like the Shadows of Yharnam, I hate the Shadows of Yharnam because they just like run at you and they do every attack they can just to destroy you. I think it's crazy that you like the Shadows of Yharnam, but you don't like the crystal people in Elden Ring.
The crystal people in Elden Ring are stupid. It's just annoying. But
just get
Shadows
clubbed.
of Yharnam, I don't love Shadows of Yharnam. I just think they're really cool and they're manageable.
I like the Shadows of Yharnam when it's over. I think the worst part about Shadows of Yharnam is when like you're at the very end, they do that crazy move with the giant snake that like insta kills you. Yeah. And it's like, this is when we're gonna do the move at the very. I hate that shit. We're at the very end of a fight. That could be like a very labored experience where they just rip it from you. Like they put like the hardest move at the very end. I hate that shit. You do the hardest move if I like am playing like shit. How about that?
No, they
do
switch to the hardest
game.
move whenever you're like popping off.
Yeah, do that. I'm fine with that. But not at the end. Do that like in the middle, like to get me to back off or something. I don't know. Just don't do Shadows of Yharnam.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they look cool. And one of them has a gun. It's pretty cool.
Bone Lords in Dark Souls 2, the 3 skeleton overlords, and it's just like probably 30 skeletons and like bone wheel skeletons, and you're just like, what's happening?
Yeah, the Abyss Watchers in Dark Souls 3.
Abyss Watchers.
Okay.
Yeah, well, because they bring in a third one that fights with you, so it's like it's not that bad. And then the second phase is actually like the fun part where you fight just one of them. But I don't like it when they do like the gank squad. Okay. Do you remember this? Do you remember in Dark Souls 2, the Sunken City DLC, where you fight 3 NPCs at once, and one of them is it? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What the fuck were they doing? And one of them is in Havel armor, full Havel armor. One of them has a giant great bow. What
Dark Souls 2
are
isn't
you
that
talking?
gank.
Oh, Dark Souls 2 is that gank. Let me tell you. The second to last boss is 2 guys. Although there is a 2-guy boss fight in Dark Souls 2 that I actually am not too upset about, and that's the twin dragon riders, which you probably don't even remember because they're so inconsequential.
Yeah, you're right. I don't remember.
Yeah. But I could talk about that shit for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
We're up to 2 hours. I thought taking out a section would make us end faster. Clearly, I was wrong.
I don't know. I think 2 hours is the goal.
Yeah.
I'm not rushing, but now that we're out there, I'm like, all right, yeah, we should probably get out of here.
Yeah. Are you gonna do your
quickly.
bonus segment?
Quickly do my bonus segment.
Okay.
Okay, well, I have a list of games that I'd like you to take a look at, but I'm willing to add to the list.
Oh, okay.
So the 3 games that I'm thinking of playing, in addition to Faith and whatever else I said, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, is milk inside of a bag of milk inside of a bag.
Oh shit! I actually heard about that. Yeah.
Accompanied with milk outside of a bag of milk.
Is that real?
Yeah, it's a sequel.
Oh, well.
A game called Darkwood. Have you ever heard of Darkwood?
I have heard of Darkwood, yes.
Okay, it's like the Hotline Miami horror game. And then a little bit cheating, because I wanted to make it a list of indie games. Didn't know this game wasn't an indie game. Little Nightmares. Bandai Namco game.
Oh, interesting. Don't play any of those games. Play Crow Country instead.
Have you played Crow Country?
I have not played Crow Country, but it's 10% off right now.
So, I want to play Crow Country.
Uh-huh.
But I'm worried it's a little too similar to Lorelei. They're both Resident Evil 1 inspired survival horror games.
Yeah. I think Crow Country does take a step towards Silent Hill a bit more, though. So, my answer from the very beginning, I would probably not skip milk inside of a bag of milk, but like, you're going to finish that game in probably like 15 minutes.
Is that true?
I really don't think it's that long.
Oh.
It's like $1. It's also, that's another thing about this game, it's less than $2. So it's like, this is definitely not a game that you have to be like, do I really want to buy this? If it looks interesting, you just buy it. It's less than like every piece of food that is available in America right now. So you probably can just finish. I'm going to look up, how long does it take to beat milk inside of a bag of milk?
It's such a bizarre name for a game.
14 minutes.
Oh, well, I'll just play that as well as something else then.
Yeah, it's like, that's not even really, that shouldn't even be in the... Honestly, you probably should support the developer and just buy an experience for yourself, but you don't even really have to... This isn't even the type of game that you have to play. You just watch it online. Yeah. But I would not do that, because you should, if you're gonna... if it's less than $1, just buy the fucking game.
Well, here, tell you what. I'm on Steam, and Crow Country has a demo.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna play the demo, and if it grips me, I will buy it and play it. And if it doesn't, I'll likely play Darkwood.
You can do that. I've seen Darkwood. I think Darkwood is gonna just. I think Darkwood is probably gonna take a lot of your time, because it like. If I am correct, isn't Darkwood sort of almost like a roguelike in a way?
I didn't get that from the trailers, but I didn't read any reviews or anything.
Do you own Darkwood?
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say it's 75% off right now.
It's probably like 75% off when I bought it as well.
Yeah, it's probably that too. Yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
Thank you for your input, and on our Halloween episode, I'm sure you'll hear what I decided. So stay tuned for that.
All right.
I think that brings us to the end of our episode.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Any final words for the people?
Ooh, it's fall, baby.
It is.
Start. Are you white? Pumpkin spice
I had my
latte.
pumpkin coffee this morning, so I'm gonna have to answer yes.
Yes, you are. And if you aren't white and you drank that, guess what? You're white.
You're white now.
You're white now. So sorry for you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for watching our episode on boss fights. Me and Jonathan are gonna go enjoy some nice autumn air. So
yeah.
until next time, we will see ya.
Bye-bye.